Welcome to the Keeping the Nostalgia Live show. I am your host, Billy Powell. You can go to YouTube, just type in the YouTube search bar there, Keeping the Nostalgia Live show. You'll see most of our shows on there. A lot of shows are still going to be on our podcast site, which is keepingthenostalgialive.podbean.com. That's all one word, keepingthenostalgialive.podbean.com. We've had some greats on there: Kent Benson, Rick Mount, Coach Gene Cady. Even some interestings where you may not recognize the name, but you got to listen to the story. So all about most 95% of them about the great game of basketball in the state of Indiana. I've got some baseball and football and some music tossed in there too. But please check out keepingthenostalgialive.podbean.com and the Keeping the Nostalgia Live show on YouTube. As you can see with us today, our guest is Dave Worland. Dave, thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to help keep the nostalgia alive and talk about your life.
Well, I'd love to do that. I'm honored. And you just mentioned a few folks on there you've had on there. So I don't know if I can match up with some of those fellows, but I'll do my very best to tell you my story.
You know, Dave is one of those where I've been doing this to let everybody know I've been doing this for 8, 9, 10 years. And, you know, you learn something new about the game of basketball, especially high school basketball, every day. I thought I knew it all. I don't. And Dave kind of slipped under the radar because there's some great stories that I hope Dave can share. And I'm going to share one story, and it's a Cathedral story. Dave was 20 years the principal at Cathedral High School, and we're going to talk about his capacity now and what he does for the school. But I was a freshman in high school. Cathedral was ranked number 2. It was 1983. I went to Broad Ripple High School. Donnie Harris on our team was fouled by a Cathedral Irish. He went to the line, sank 2, and ended the season for Cathedral, who was ranked number 2 in the state. So that's one of my memories about Cathedral. I have great memories while being at Broad Ripple High School and Cathedral. But we're going to go to Lafayette, Indiana. Dave, tell us a little bit about where you were born and raised, and tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah. Well, born and raised in Lafayette. I was actually born in Fowler, Indiana, so kind of a Benton County guy, but I was less than a year old when Mom and Dad took my 3 older brothers and I to Lafayette. He was in the furniture business. People been around for a while probably would remember Village Furniture in Lafayette. So my dad started that business, and my 3 older brothers, Terry, Bob, and Jim, were in grade school when we moved to Lafayette. Of course, we moved right across the street to Lafayette Central Catholic, the high school there. Just been built probably for about 8-10 years. And so as Mom and Dad kind of ran the business, we all went to the grade school. St. Mary's was the Catholic school at that time, as K through 8. So we were very fortunate to have an outstanding grade school education. We're taught by the sisters and the priest there. Monsignor Potoff was our pastor. And then we all just kind of would hang out. We'd cross 9th Street and go to CC across the street, and we'd kind of just lived there half the day, and then we'd go to school the other part of the day, and then summers we were home half the day and on the grounds of Central Catholic the rest of the time.
Was your dad athletic?
He was involved in a lot of the sports at Fowler High School back then. Didn't go on beyond high school, but he loved athletics. He had it in his genes to follow sports like most people did back then and even today. But he kind of instilled in us to compete and have fun, and but also work hard and make a buck or two by the time you get out of high school or college so that you can take care of your family.
What was your first love? Was it baseball? Was it basketball, football? What was the first sport that you remember kind of getting excited about or wanting to play or, falling in love with?
Yeah, well, it was definitely baseball. John Eberly was the head baseball coach in my early years and was for a long time at Lafayette Central Catholic. So when I was like in kindergarten, 1st grade through 7th grade, one of my friends, Bob Bollinger, and I were the bat boys for Central Catholic's baseball team. So we always wanted to be baseball players. So we played a lot, and we were involved in a lot of the baseball teams, growing up in Lafayette. But it was really John Eberly that kind of inspired that love of baseball. So that was always my number one love. But basketball was right there behind it. Every court in the neighborhood had a basket, so or a garage. So we were able to play a lot more basketball just because unless you had a few other guys to catch the fly balls or to throw batting practice to you, you could always play by yourself in basketball, work on your jump shot and dribbling and those kind of things. So baseball won, basketball too, but I loved them both.
So, I was born and raised in Indianapolis. So I guess because I was where I was at geographically, I was a Reds fan. So you guys being a little bit north, I'm assuming you were either a Cubs or a White Sox fan, or fill me in on what kind of fan you were.
Oh, big time Cubs, diehard Cubs all the way. My dad and his dad were big Cub fans. Quick story, yeah, very much Cubs. But when the Cubs went to the playoffs, it's hard to get playoff tickets, obviously, but it was back in the days when you had the rotary phones, and I was trying to get 2 tickets to the Cubs World Series or playoffs, whichever it would be, and I got through, and I got 2 tickets and got a hold of someone. I mean, I did it for like 3 hours, just kept speed dialing, speed dialing, speed dialing. I got 2 tickets, and of course they said, "Do you want to go to the playoffs or you want to go to the World Series? If you go to the World Series, they may not get there, but if they get there, you get 2 tickets." So I said, I'm going for the gusto, man. Playoffs will be nice, but the World Series, my dad always promised me he was going to take me to the World Series. Well, as it turned out, I told Dad, so he and I were going to go to the World Series. It was kind of a flip flop because at that time Dad was retired and I was young enough that I could get him there. So he was excited. I was excited. Even Jeff Washburn, who's a sports writer, the Journal and Courier at that time, Lafayette Journal and Courier, I told him a story, and it kind of became a big story around the country because it was a flip flop. The kid who was going to go with his dad to the World Series to see the Cubs was going to take his dad because at that time Dad was in his 70s. Well, sadly, they got beaten in the playoffs. We didn't get to the World Series that year. It was in the 80s, somewhere in one of those years that they won the playoffs. So, but no, diehard Cubs, when they won, I had my 2 sons with me when they did win the World Series. Dad had been deceased 10 years when they won it here, a handful of years back. So we were one of those Cubs fans that finally got a little bit of joy when they won the World Series here.
Did you have a favorite player on the Cubs? Was your favorite player on an additional baseball team or a different baseball team?
Ernie was the man, I was, of course, Kessinger and Beckert, that double play combination were in there, Ron Santo, Billy Williams, I loved them all, but he was my hero, idol. He was pretty special.
It's interesting, and everybody that we interview, I ask that, and below Indianapolis, southern Indiana flows toward the Cardinals. That Indianapolis area, just a little bit south, the Reds. But it's interesting how we become fans of our environment.
Oh, without a doubt, and a lot of my good friends. Mark Andrews, one of my good friends, he's a big White Sox fan. So we still battle. He grew up in Lafayette as well. So we have some good times. My son-in-law, he grew up in Cincinnati. He's a big Reds fan. So you're right. It's kind of wherever you're at, you kind of love the team you're in, and you remember all those great wins. You try to forget about all those tough years. You always remember the championships and the big wins. You forget about those years that maybe the Cubbies were in last place. Back in the heydays back when.
Yeah, and at least the Cubs and the White Sox have done the right thing and won a World Series in the past, years, so that at least you can relish that with also thinking about all the hard times.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah, those are the ones that you remember the certain plays and you remember certain events during the high times and the low times. You still love them. I mean, if you're not a diehard, even you got to hang with them when they're in the cellar at the same time they're in the way up, or you're not a real fan.
So 3 older brothers, right?
Correct.
So you kind of have you kind. Okay, I'm sorry. So you kind of had a little bit of an idea of what you were getting yourself into when you went to Central Catholic.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they were, like I said, we lived right across the street. So my brothers, when we lived there in Sarasota Drive, they'd hear the tardy bell from the school, because you could hear it from our house, because our house was like just right there. It was just, like 100 steps. You're right there walking inside. So they would go to school when they heard the tardy bell, because they had 5 minutes and they get there in 1 minute. So, and I hadn't left yet. I was still going to St. Mary's at the time. So we had a carpool. So they were there, and they kind of prepped me a little bit, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the not so good. Because if they ever did something that wasn't good, then when I came over there, they'd say, well, you're so-and-so's little brother, and he did so-and-so over here, little teasing things. So yeah, I was ingrained in all the goodness of Central Catholic in those early years, and became to really love the school, and proud to be a graduate there of 1973.
So what did you get into basketball first? Was there how were the seasons set up? Did they have a football team?
They did, and of course, when I went there, 69 was my freshman year. They had an undefeated team, football, as far as football. They had a really good team that year. That was before the playoffs, so there was no such thing as a playoff. So they were 10-0, so they kind of called themselves a state champ, even though there were other teams that were 10-0 in the state. But hey, everybody thinks they're the ones that's a 10-0. So we had a really good football team. We always had some really competitive basketball teams. I mean, I would watch like Bill Cutter and Henry Ebershoff and Wayne Deanhart, and a lot of guys when I was in the younger years who played for Central Catholic in baseball, football, basketball, and all that. So I had a lot of older guys that were high school age that I would love to go see and play. And even back then, this was back in the, like in the 60s, mid 60s, we would actually have some games on TV. Lafayette Jeff would play on TV, Central Catholic. That time, Harrison McCutcheon were split out into smaller schools. But it was really neat because it was a big deal. People would say, hey, this is the whole technology is really great, but what was it like back then? But there was, good games, games of the week. Everybody knew who was playing when, where, and how. And the schedules were such that if you couldn't get to the game, for a lot of them, you could watch them on TV, the local TV stations.
So how did it go? Did you play freshman basketball, and then was there a varsity, freshman, junior varsity baseball team? How did your sports career at Central Catholic go?
Yeah, well, the sports career went with, I liked cross country, so I'd kind of run cross country in the off season, and wasn't one of the top runners by any shape or means, but it kept me in shape, and it kept me disciplined in the fall, because I didn't play football, but I did run cross country. But then in the winter, played all 4 years of basketball. Freshman year, played on the freshman team. Sophomore year, the JV team. Junior year, played JV and some varsity, and then senior year, I played all varsity on a really great team. We had a lot of great players my senior year at Lafayette Central Catholic. So it was kind of that standard role. We had a lot of good athletes, and you had to work really hard then, as it is today, if you wanted to ultimately play on the varsity team. A lot of competition, a lot of good athletes. We had great coaching. It was when you didn't have the off-season stuff. If you wanted to get to be a better player in the off-season, there wasn't the AAUs, it wasn't the organized Nike camps and all that. You went down to Bishop's Woods, and you got 4 or 8 other guys and said, let's go play. And you'd play outdoors down at the Bishop's Woods, or you'd maybe get our coach or sneak in the back door at the gym and go in the gym and shoot around on a night or a weekend or summertime. So it was a lot of fun. And again, we had the neighborhood boys that would get together, and we'd play outdoors in the outdoor courts. So we enjoyed it, and we were outside a lot, and we were running around the neighborhood. It's a little different back then. Like I said, no emails, no technology, no computers. You pretty much were outdoors, and unless you were doing homework inside. But it was fun, and we had a great. Even the folks that were in the neighborhoods would kind of take care of us. It was a neat neighborhood. If they went to the public school, the private schools, whatever, we'd hang out. Some of my best friends ended up going to Lafayette Jeff, and when we'd play against Lafayette Jeff, it was kind of neat because when we'd play, we were best buddies in the neighborhood, and then all of a sudden we're in a sectional championship game in Crawley Center, kind of working to beat each other. And there was one time in my senior year, Vint Vaughn was in my class going through grade school, and Vint and I were just talking. It was on a free throw or something, probably third quarter of the game, and that was when Jeff had won 29 straight sectional championships. Marion Crawley most of those years, and but Vint and I just kind of looked at each other on the floor during a free throw and said, "Would you ever imagine that we would be competing against each other at the varsity level in a jam-packed house of rabid fans for Jeff and CC?" But those are the memories. The memories are great when you win, or they're great, but it's always the guys that you competed with or the guys you played against that really make those memories special.
Baseball was just coming into it, especially with ISHAA and having a tournament and everything. Was it set up as sectionals also during your career with baseball? And was it the same sectional as it was in basketball?
It was very similar. Of course, that was a one class back then, of course, but yes, it was, even though football didn't have a tournament run, baseball did. You had a baseball sectional, one class. So, the big schools, little schools all played against each other. And it was usually the same teams, but not always. It kind of depend on the geographical setup. Not all teams had a baseball team, but most did. Almost everybody had a basketball team. So you did have sectionals, you had regional, semi-state, state, just like they do today. And again, that was, like I said, that was back in the 60s and in 70s when early 70s when I was in high school. So it wasn't a lot different, other than the fact that, there was a lot more teams back then. So our sectional would have maybe, there's a lot of 6 and 18 sectionals now. Well, back then there was sectionals that had 14, 16 teams in it. Just as I said, Harrison McCutcheon alone, I could roll out 7 or 8 teams that fed into those, Southwestern and Klondike and the schools that fed into those. So those all had high school teams. So it was kind of neat because, back then, when you competed, if you won a sectional sometimes back in those 60s, you had to win 5 games to win a sectional. It wasn't 3 games and in. So it was competitive, but it meant a lot too. If you were able to get to that championship game, and if you were fortunate enough to win, there was a kind of that pride factor to say, wow, we made it through. And usually you knew the guys on the team, so you kind of had that reminder factor. You'd tell them when you get to be older. Every year you get older, you can't tell them about that high school years,
So was Al Brown there the whole term that you were there at Central Catholic?
He was not. My freshman year, John Eberly was the basketball coach. And John Eberly, who I think the world of, he was let go. There was the community, and he rest his soul right now. John passed many years ago. But even back then, this was 1969, Billy, and I can't say who it is because I don't know who it is, but a decision was made to terminate his contract. And what was really neat, the powers to be back then got him a job at Lafayette Jeff, teaching and coaching. So he didn't lose his income because everybody loved John Eberly. He was a great baseball coach, and he helped coach over at Jeff. But they did, because he wasn't winning enough games. I'll just kind of say it. He wasn't winning enough sectional. Jeff had won 29 straight years. I think somebody wanted to see if we could get a run because we had some really good athletes, as I said earlier, at Lafayette Central Catholic. So long story short, they looked for a new coach, and they found an awesome coach. At that time, Coach Brown was over at Purdue doing some coaching over there. And again, the folks in charge of Central Catholic kind of was able to convince him to take his coaching at the high school level at Lafayette Central Catholic. And in 3 years, he built a team that won a sectional championship.
What are some of your memories of Coach Al Brown?
Well, my early memories, it was my sophomore year was the first year. And I probably don't remember anybody that was quite as organized as he was. He was just so organized with paperwork and programs. He'd write all kinds of wonderful things up for the program. And again, back in that time, that wasn't the norm. I mean, you got people sometimes, sports writers that are doing that for you now, but he was super organized and very dedicated. I mean, and very knowledgeable. I mean, he was uh, he was ahead of his time, I believe, back then, dealing with maybe some of the psychology of coaching, dealing with some of the the specifics. I kind of say sometimes defense back then was just kind of staying by your man, just make sure your man doesn't get too far away from you. There wasn't technique involved that I remembered as a junior high or even as I got a little older, but he taught the fundamentals of defense. This is where you stand and this is how you help and this is the timing, and we did shell drills, and it was new. It was a new level of training and teaching that I sure had not seen, and I think I can speak for a lot of guys that were on our team. It was a ramp up to, hey, if we're going to spend this time for these 2 hours of practice, we're going to get after it. We're going to learn. This is a classroom. Coach Brown was always he was a teacher first, and then he was kind of a coach second. He taught us the fundamentals. He let us know this is the way we're going to do it. And there wasn't any, you could always, kind of ask questions to understand it better, but you weren't going to ask him why, because you just do it his way. And he got an instant credibility. The older guys, like I said, I was a sophomore the first year, but those guys that were seniors that year, I mean, they were successful and did better. So the program just kind of, Al Ricks was someone that became a really good player. And I think if you talk to Al Ricks today, he'd say Coach Brown, was the one who helped him become a really good basketball player and got him a college scholarship.
I mean, it plays out like like the movie Hoosiers, or it should be a movie. I mean, Lafayette Jeff won the sectional 29 years in a row. I mean, it was that the conversations in coffee houses and bars and did, I mean, take us through, getting to that season. But, did you even in your mind think we were going to win sectional that year and do as well as you guys did, which you had a phenomenal season?
Right. Well, I'll back up a little bit. Because of Lafayette Jeff, over the years, us guys that were at CC, we saw their success. And Marion Crawley was an outstanding coach. So we saw that from a distance. I don't care if we're in first grade or seventh grade, eighth grade. And really with Marion Crawley, whenever they won a sectional all those years when we were little, he didn't make a big deal about it. I don't even think they didn't even cut down the nets. It was like, let's get this thing over with, in a modest way, not in an uppity way, but it was just that level of success that he brought to Lafayette Jeff was, hey, we're planning to go to the semi-state. We're going to win this sectional. Let's just get it going and get it over with. Let's go to the regional. We're going to win that one outright. Now, semi-state, okay, we're bringing teams down from the, from the region, and we got some pretty darn good schools come down. And then that's when they started to cut down the nets. They cut the nets down at the semi-state, but regional and sectional, not so much. So we saw that. I mean, in '64, they won a state championship at Lafayette Jeff, and those guys were, they weren't just the Lafayette Jeff idols. They were the guys like us, the grade school kids who watched them play. So we saw that. We saw the success in that area. So fast forward to Coach Brown. You asked, did we think we were going to win the sectional? Absolutely, we thought we were going to win, and for two reasons. One, we had some talent, and we had Tom Cutter was our leading scorer, leading rebounder. Tommy went on to play at Western Michigan. He was awesome. So it was no fluke. I mean, we knew we had some good talent. Mark Andrews, Kevin Crow, Bill Lottie, Bobby Reilly. I mean, it goes on and on. We had some really good players that year. So that's number one. But number two, I go back to Coach Brown being so organized. He had an excellent assistant coaching staff. Tim Wolf was on his staff. Tim was a great basketball coach. Bill Bogan was doing a lot of scouting for him. And he had it was like a college program from the standpoint of preparation. So we knew when the teams got off the bus, how we were going to guard them, who was going to guard who. So we believed we could win only because we knew we were prepared. Now, it was no easy task because, we had to beat the Friday before we beat Lafayette Jeff. We beat Jeff by 1 point in the sectional to win, and it was back and forth. I mean, they were tough too. But the night before on Friday, we went overtime with West Lafayette. Mark Andrews hits a free throw in overtime, one free throw. They were tied, I forget what it was, 55-55 in regulation. 1 point was scored in overtime. Mark hits a free throw somewhere in the middle of the overtime. Nobody else scored. So it wasn't a cakewalk, but every time we were on the floor, we were going to compete. And if we would have lost either of those games, it wasn't because we weren't prepared and we didn't work hard and we weren't, playing together. It's just because, hey, ball didn't bounce our way at the end of the game or whatever.
So is it true that Coach Al Brown said you guys were going to walk home at halftime if you didn't win?
That's true. I think yes. I'm not, and I say that only because he would say some things sometimes, and we believed him. He wasn't just blowing smoke. If he said we're going to do something, then we would. So if we would have lost, I guarantee. Well, the good thing is, if people know Lafayette, it's not that far a walk. I mean, Jeff's on 9th Street or at 18th Street. We were on 9th Street. So we, 9 blocks. I mean, let's face it, that's kind of far, but not too bad. But yeah, we might have walked home that night.
I read where one parent couldn't take it and actually walked home to listen to it at the house.
That is true. That was Tom Cutter's father. Mr. Cutter was watching the game. Very good fan, just a loving guy. But he would get real nervous at the games, and I don't think he ever did it during the regular season, but he'd get nervous in regular season too. But yeah, I don't even think it got to be halftime. It was just, and it was nip and tuck. I mean, actually, Jeff went up first half on us like 7 or 8 points. I remember, and I think that might have been the time Mr. Cutter walked home, and he listened to it on the radio and heard about the championship from the radio. So that is so true. And if anybody was in Crowley Center that game, I mean, the fire marshal would have probably shut us down because it was jam packed, and it's what high school basketball is all about, should be all about. It was all about the fans and the cheering and the pride and all those kind of things. And even the folks from Lafayette Jeff, although they were sad, I'm sure, disappointed that they lost, they're very gracious as well, because again, we're all in the same community, and they were happy for us, but at the same time, they wish we didn't win because they wanted Jeff to win.
So what was the size of, what did Central Catholic get to choose from compared, what were the sizes of Jeff and Catholic comparison wise?
Right. Well, Central Catholic, probably in its heyday back in the early, maybe in 1960, might have been the largest it had ever been. It was at that time, it's now a junior senior high school, but way back then it was a co-ed 9 through 12. I think the highest enrollment was 600 in the heyday, like 1960 or so. By that time in 73, that year, we were smaller, and we were probably about 410. I think each class is about 100 kids, So in that time with Jeff, Jeff, they were the big school, so they were right in that probably 3,500 range of kids, co-ed 9 through 12 back in then. So they were still the kingpins. I mean, they had the numbers and they had the tradition and all that. But a lot of the kiddos that played a lot of athletics would kind of split between Central Catholic and Lafayette, because Central Catholic was built in the late 1950s, like 1957, and a lot of the folks who put that vision together came from really strong athletic families. The Flynn's and the Bogans and so they sent their kids there. So we had our share. And that was before girls athletics even, back then. Even when I was a senior, we had GAA, Girls Athletic Association. So there wasn't IHSA sport for girls back then, sadly, because, a lot of the girls that were in my class and older than myself at all schools in Indiana didn't get to play in IHSA basketball. They played GAA, and it was kind of like, wasn't much. It wasn't very competitive. Officials weren't involved. But anyway, it was a great time. It was a great era. We had a lot of fun. We learned a lot in the losses as well as the wins. And some of my dear friends today were teammates and opponents and family members of neighbors that really loved their schools. A lot of pride. We're talking a lot of athletics here, but there's a lot of other cool things going on at our schools back then that built our character and gave us opportunities that we were able to get to today.
So you guys win the regionals, and then you get to play in Assembly Hall, correct?
No, we actually went to Mackey Arena.
Oh,
We
okay.
got to go.
Okay.
Yeah, the regional was at Crawley Center, same place we played the sectional at Lafayette Jeff. So we won both those games. It's a 2-game regional. We go to the semi-state, which is in Mackey Arena, which again, what a dream, being able to play in Mackey Arena. It wasn't even very old back then. And Mackey Arena was opened in '69. So we're playing there in '73. 4 years after that, it just, broke the ribbon to open it up. And again, full house, great game. We played Lebanon in the first game. Lebanon had beat us in the regular season. We only lost 4 games regular season, but Lebanon was one of those losses. The Walker boys played for them, and they had a really good team. And they got to the semi-state. They didn't get there by luck. So, but we had one of our better games, I think, at that time, and kind of beat them going away. I think it might have ended up 8 or 9, but we pretty much had control of the game. But so we got a little revenge from the regular season game. And then we went to the championship.
Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah. So we played South Bend Adams in the championship game, and they had an awesome team. They came down from South Bend and were really talented. And they beat us 7 points, good game, but they just, it was back then, and it's still today. Sometimes teams have played 2 games in one day, and we were not able to play the first game. We played the second game against Lebanon. And so we didn't have a lot of downtime, no excuse. I mean, they beat us and they were better, and, hats off to them. They went to the Final Four, but we were 1 game away of going to Assembly Hall. Back then, that's where you get Assembly Hall, because the Final Four that year was at Assembly Hall. That was before some of the larger Indianapolis areas were formed and had the places they're now playing in the bigger gyms and bigger places.
So during your senior year, you're thinking about, where am I going to go to college? What am I going to do with my life? What were your choices? Where did you choose? And who kind of led you to those decisions?
Right. Well, 2 people. My dad, he led me to the decision that I should probably, they call it gap year these days. Back then, he wanted me to work in his business. I had 3 older brothers. They all went in the furniture business. Terry, my oldest brother, did go to college at Marion College, but he kind of went right into his furniture business, Dad's furniture business. Bob and Jim went to the war. That was the Vietnam War was going on. So right out of high school, they both went to the Vietnam War. They came back, worked for my dad. And Terry came back from Marion College and worked for him. So Dad thought it'd be a good idea for me to not go to college and just work for him. And so he was one. So that was my influencer. So I did that. I didn't go to college after my first year because I was going to work in the business. Well, right when I got out of high school, I worked under Al Brown as head 8th grade coach. So I'm coaching 8th grade basketball for Central Catholic, working at the furniture store during the rest of the time. And Coach Brown kind of took me to the side, maybe second semester of the school year, and said, why aren't you going to, go to college? And I said, well, Dad wants me to run the business, help the business. He's got a big time ideas. And here's the thing that Dad would tell me. He'd say, help me understand this, Dave. You want to pay to go to college, and I want to train you and pay you while you're being trained. So Dad's philosophy was, and he didn't go to college. He said, why would you want to pay to go to college for 4 years and get debt built up where I'm the best teacher you can ever get. I'm better than any of those Purdue professors. I'm better than anybody there. I'm going to teach you how to run a business, entrepreneurship. So kind of made sense. And of course, at that time, money was like, if you were anything and anybody, you had to make a good living. That's how people would gauge how successful you were. Where Al Brown then took me aside and said, okay, that's good, but why don't you just give it a shot? Once you get a teaching degree, then if you want to go work in the furniture store, go do it. So he inspired me to go to Purdue that next year. And then I ended up going to Purdue in 3 years and 2 summers to get my degree so that I could teach and coach and go that direction. So I did. I gave up the furniture business. Again, my 3 older brothers were highly successful in that. I was the black sheep of the family, so to speak, in a good way, I guess. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but I didn't take that path. I didn't go to the retail furniture business. I went into teaching and coaching, which was my love, and it's my love today.
Was Dad upset?
I wouldn't say he was upset. He was disappointed, and he just thought I wasn't quite all there. I think he just couldn't get the understanding. He was disappointed, but he still loved me and he still supported me. But he thought I made a poor choice. Now I'll fast forward the 2 weeks before my dad passed. He did tell me he was very proud of me and that I made that choice. So he never told me that before. He was still kind of shaking his head all during my career up until then, like, you kidding me? Or, But in any event, yeah, we did have a nice conversation, which filled my heart because he did give me the kind of the thumbs up that that he did realize that at some point in time that I made a good decision.
So same question for at Purdue. What did you think you were going to do? Did you have an idea that you wanted to continue coaching? Who helped you along the way? And what was it like getting your degree at Purdue and then going out and finding a job?
Yeah, well, yeah, I went straight, just like Coach Brown had said. I really went to Purdue. Of course, it's right across the river. So, I mean, Purdue was part of my life. I mean, I went to all the events and programs. And when you live in Lafayette, you're practically on the campus of Purdue. So it wasn't a big change for me because I hung around Purdue some anyway when I was a little bit older and would go to the events. So I wasn't in fraternities. I lived in a house with a couple of my friends, Billy Milady, Tommy Cutter, were good buddies. So we had a house on the east side, and I did a little work part-time, but I got my degree. I got it fast. So I did it on the fast track. And the reason I did it was I knew I wanted to be a teacher and coach. I mean, that was my love. I mean, I couldn't wait to be a real educator, teacher. I was doing a lot of substitute teaching. That was part of my part-time job. So when I was going to Purdue as a student, I knew I wanted to be a teacher or coach. I mean, I wanted to do it as quickly as I could. So when I was making a few bucks to pay my tuition, as my dad would have said before, how are you going to pay your tuition? Well, I was making it by substitute teaching, while I was in college. And I went to, it was a great experience. Anybody who's listening, if they're thinking they want to be a teacher and they're, in college or they're in that age group, go and substitute teach. Elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. First of all, we need a lot of good substitute teachers, but 2, it's where you get your foot in the door and you find out what's really like. So I did that. Like I said, graduated in 3 years and 2 summers. As soon as I got out of, and during all those years, I was still coaching under Coach Brown. I was coaching some 8th grade basketball in my early years. Then I became the JV coach at CC when I was like a second year at Purdue. My last year at Purdue, my 3rd year, I was like assistant varsity coach under Tim Wolf. By that time, Coach Brown had moved on and Tim Wolf took over. So Tim kept me on his staff. So I was like his varsity assistant. So I got great exposure, great experience because I'm traveling practices. I'm at all the games as a college student. But when I got out of college, I continued to coach for 2 years in Lafayette. I went to St. Lawrence, was a 7th and 8th grade teacher. So I got my first real teaching job and got paid. I think back then, I thought I died and went to heaven. I was making $9,000 as a teacher, so this is like at 76 or something. I really didn't even know what I made. I don't think at the time. I didn't care. I just, once Sister James told me she was going to hire me as a teacher, she came and even caught me. I was going to the car leaving, and she said, "David, you want to know what you make as a teacher? And I said, not really. You're a sister, you're a nun, you're not going to cheat me, I'm sure. And she said, okay, well, you're going to make it $9,000. I said, okay, that's great. I'll take it, So I did that for 2 years, and then I got my first head coaching job at Washington Catholic High School 2 years after I was at CC. Those last 2 years helping Coach Wolf, and then getting a good start as a teacher at St. Lawrence.
So did you, because you kind of started the feeder system when you went to Washington Catholic, did you learn that from Coach Al Brown?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I plagiarized about anything and everything I could get my hands on, whether it was his handbook, whether it was his style, and other people too. I mean, there were other influencers that were other coaches that I would have came across. One of the assistant coaches at Central Catholic was a guy named Denny Hoff, very strong technician of the game. And there was many other people that I would come across that I'd meet in the coaching profession. Danny Dawson, good example. Danny went to Benton Central. He was an excellent high school basketball coach. I got to be friends with him. So the list was endless of people that would help form me. But as most professions go, you got to be yourself at some time. You can take and steal and plagiarize and copy anything and everything people's style, but you're not going to really be able to withstand the long-term success or involvement unless you really take it to be yourself and you form your own years. And at Washington Catholic, Billy, I was given the opportunity. Sister Joseph Louise was my boss. She was a superintendent and principal, and she let me do whatever I wanted within reason. I mean, she wouldn't let me go crazy on something, but I was able to start a program. There was a little bitty school who had success in the past. At different times, they had good athletes, but they hadn't won a sectional there since 1947, and so they were hungry. So they got this rookie out of Lafayette, Indiana, and gave me a chance. And after 3 years, we were fortunate to build some winning teams, and we even had some teams that were ranked in the state. Back then it was single A, but little bitty Washington Catholic, because we had some good players. I had some excellent assistant coaches that were from that area: Morris Petty, Tom Tucker, Andy Eigel, people who worked well together, and some really good athletes that ended up being very successful. And we were fortunate to win a sectional in 1985. We beat Jack Butcher in Lagodi on a Friday night. We had a good chance to play against Bar Reed and beat them, right towards the end. And so great memories there, but I was kind of young and dumb still, because I was still, in my mid-20s. So I probably didn't know half as much as I thought I did, but I just went by the seat of my pants, and I had some good people, a good principal. And, I just kind of led with my gut. And then finally I was able to probably figure some things out. The year before we won the sectional, here's a good example. Joe Todrank was the basketball coach at Bar Reeve.
What a character, by the way.
Oh, he's quite a character. And Joe's become one of my best friends. He mentored me. So I moved to Washington, Indiana. I'd never been there in my life. I didn't even know there was such a thing as Washington, Indiana. So I didn't know anybody down in Southern Indiana. But I was excited about going to the school. Well, Joe kind of took me in, mentored me, didn't have to. I mean, he just was a good guy, but he is a character and was good to me. Well, that junior year, we had a better team our junior year when the year before we won that sectional 85. So in 84, we were better than Bar Reeve. We played them in the sectional. We were hands down. We had better talent. We had a better regular season, and Joe outcoached me. Joe slowed the game down. He played the old, delay game, and I was not prepared for it. The head coach didn't have that I didn't have that in my resume of plays, So I was like calling timeouts, trying to figure out how to do it, and we lost. So and I took full credit for that loss. And so luckily the kids that were junior that year and a couple sophomores came back the next year and we won the sectional. And but that's where you learn. I didn't throw the towel in. I did say, and here's my good friend Joe. The good thing was here's Joe, a class guy. Joe Todrank comes into our locker room and just applauds our kids. And we just got done outsmarting their head coach. And those kids, their heads were in their laps crying. But Joe came, patted each one of them on the head, said, "Hey, sun's going to rise tomorrow. Everything will be fine." And then Joe goes back to his locker room and he greets my wife because my wife loved Joe. And so Janet's in there crying because Washington Catholic got beat. But Joe gives her a big hug. And, it all comes down to the friendships you make. And you always want to win, but you got to find something in a loss that you can take with you. But we all learned so much that year. And thank goodness I was mentored by people like Joe Todrank, Gary Duncan, Stan Neal, Jack Butcher. The list goes on and on. These are people that, they go to battle for each other. I do the same for them. They went to my wedding, these coaches that I battled with. And most of them are still living, thank God, today. And we have a big reunion down in Huntingburg every year. A bunch of old coaches, referees. We're all in the 65 to 95 range, and we get about 80 of us, and we meet every year, second Monday in June, and tell these stories. And of course, the stories change a little bit after a few years. They get a little more twisted, but they're still fun.
No, Roger Kaiser fills me in on those stories that get inflated every year. Dale Harris is probably down there with you guys also. Hey, did Joe Todrank, was he wearing his white patent shoes, or was that earlier in the 70s that he wore those when he coached?
Yeah, that was earlier. That I didn't get to see those shoes. I heard about them, but he kept those at home. When we played in the early 80s, he didn't wear those. He was a little modest, I guess, back then.
Coach Duncan's a character too.
Oh my goodness.
Jiminy Christmas.
He beat us in the regional. The year that we won the sectional, I was telling you about, we played Southridge in the regional, and he had a tradition of doing a flip when he'd win. And he did his flip right in front of me. I was about ready to flip him myself over 3 more times when he did it, because it was a close game. Of course, they went on to the Final Four 2 years in a row, and that was the second year Southridge went to the Final Four. And again, Gary's a dear friend. We ride motorcycles together. We get out around in the summer. Still, today we like to, when we can, try to get together and catch up. And I'm going to put in a plug for Gary. I think he's going to be up for the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. So I'm going to be on his fan committee of trying to get him some votes.
I totally agree with that. So was it intimidating to coach against Jack Butcher? What kind of how did you go? What kind of attitude did you have going into the game? Is it really, when you went into a game playing against him, did you want to beat his butt?
Oh yeah. But it was intimidating. I mean, it was, I would say, but here's the thing about Jack. We talk off season. We had a radio show that Stan Neal and Jack and I were on, because we were the 3 local folks there in the high school. I mean, when you talk to Jack, he would be like your best buddy. I mean, Jack would, he'd buy my lunch. He'd do anything and everything, he's just your best buddy. And before the game, when we played Lagodi, didn't matter if it was at our place or his place at Lagodi, he the nicest guy in the world. I mean, he'd like, just, you'd think he was your father, your brother, your whatever. But boy, once they threw the ball up, I can't even say some of the words on the air that Jack would call me during the game. If I ever got close to his bench or I ever argued a call, he'd be nose to nose to me, like, "Worland, blah, 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 sit your whatever down." And so he was intimidating without even playing against him. But boy, when you played against him, if you were able to be intimidated, you were big time intimidated with Jack Butcher. And I say that all in a friendship way, but Jack didn't like lose, and he'd let you know it. He went down to the final seconds, and if he didn't win, you knew it. He would let you know. He wasn't your friend for a little bit of that time.
I have his book back here,
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
not highlighted because the sun is coming in or he's the best. It's back there at that particular time. Um,
Right.
so what gets you away from Washington Catholic and gets you back to Central Catholic?
Nope. I went to South Dearborn High School. Um, I'll tell you what it was. When we won the sectional that year, I was still kind of young and dumb. I still was pretty much not sure what I wanted to be yet, other than I wanted to be a head basketball coach somewhere that could win the state tournament. I had that bit of a dream. And of course, Marion High School was the school back then. They were kind of up, and they're always in the state, and they're always right up there. So I wanted to hopefully someday maybe go to a Marion High School. That would be my dream. So at Washington Catholic, I probably, at that time, I thought I probably got as far as I could if I was going to get to that next level to win a state championship as a head basketball coach in Indiana. So I was kind of looking, and Bill Slayback was someone I'd seen at clinics, and Bill's the AD and the former coach. At that time, Aurora High School, they consolidated with a few other schools to South Dearborn. And so they offered me a job, and I took it. I was just a year being married. My wife and I had only been married a year, and it's like, hey, honey, let's go to the next step and do a little stepping stone thing. So we went to South Dearborn, and there's a little 4-team sectional. So back then, what the heck, if you could get in a tournament that wasn't highly competitive, and it was only 4 teams, and you hosted it. South Dearborn hosted that sectional. So I thought, hey, there's a good way to get to the regional. So that was kind of it. And, I was maybe 31 or something, 30 years old, just thought, what's the next step? So I loved it, but I couldn't see myself staying in Washington, Indiana at Washington Catholic, my whole career. So I thought, still young, let's see what's out there. And Janet she was game. She was born and raised in Washington. So she thought it'd be kind of cool to see what it'd be like going somewhere else. So I taught English and coached basketball at South Dearborn. Bill Slayback was a great AD to work under, met some great friends there. And so I was there for 2 years, and thought I was going to stay there a lot more, but I'll just throw this little story in. There was a day where it was after my second year there, and we had some success there. We won a lot of games and won a sectional, and got to another final game of the regional. Richmond beat us in the regional. And Paul LaRocca was the athletic director at Central Catholic back then. Actually, he wasn't the athletic director. He was my athletic director when I was at Lafayette Central Catholic. But anyway, he was still very involved at Lafayette Central Catholic. And he came to South Dearborn and said, hey, Dave, dude, we got some openings at Central Catholic. The head basketball coach left, the AD left. They all went different ways. AD went to McCutcheon, the basketball coach went to Franklin. And he just wanted to know, would I want to apply for the Lafayette Central Catholic basketball job and be the AD? And I was flattered, as like, especially come from Paul. It's like, oh my gosh, Paul LaRocca wants me to come back to Central Catholic. He was my, he was my AD. He was the head football coach that won state championships. And I told Paul, I said, Paul, I am so honored that you would like me to be considered to go back as a head coach. But I said, I got some work to do here at South Dearborn. I said, I've only been here 2 years. We're building the program. Great school, good community. And he was great. He said, okay, well, I just thought I'd better check with you because we're going to post this job and just thought you'd throw your name in. So fast forward, that day I come home, and my wife, Janet, we only been married a year and a half, and she was pregnant with our first son, Lance. And she said, hey, did you talk to Paul LaRocca today? And I said, yeah. How'd you know? She said, well, he got a hold of me. Yeah, what's up? She said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I told him. I said, I was honored, blah, 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 but I'm not going anywhere. I like it here. South Dearborn, good school. Well, she started crying. She said, I think you ought to consider going back. She was pregnant, first kid. Aurora's a nice town, but it's very rural. So she didn't really have much of a friend base there. She was a kind of a stay-at-home mom for part of the time. She was pregnant. So, hey, I've been in this business long enough. If I can't keep her happy with what I'm doing, then I can't sustained. So long story short, I applied and got the job at Central Catholic. So only 2 years at South Dearborn, but then we moved to Lafayette. My whole family was there, my sisters and some of them. So Janet, we're real good friends with them. So we went there, and thank God we did, because I had a great 14 years at Central Catholic. Went there as an AD and boys basketball coach. In 1990, a lot of people probably, it's weird, people don't know this, but the school closed in 1990. Lafayette Central Catholic did. Long story short, just because of dropping enrollment and financial difficulties and all that, the school closed. And at the time, I was the boys basketball coach and the AD. And Sister Ann Kathleen was the principal. So school closed. So like, hey, I've only been there, 2 years at that time. It's like, oh boy, I better find a job. Well, long story short, the community got together and the alumni and all that. We reopened again, but Sister, it hurt her feelings quite a bit, our principal, because she kind of got blindsided on that closing. She didn't think it was going to close when it closed. That's a whole nother session. We could talk about that, but we'll move on. But she left. She didn't want to remain after that whole thing. So they asked me to be the principal. And so I said, not against that, but I want to still coach basketball. That's my love. I want to be a state championship coach and all that still. And they said, well, you can be the principal and the coach. So for, I think it was like 10 or 11 years, I was the principal and coach there. And then finally, Chad Dunwoody was my assistant coach. And Chad was ready, man. He's an excellent coach. And so by the time I had been a principal and coach for those 9-10 years, whatever that was, I was ready to give up one or the other just because time was tight and didn't have much of a life. So I did give up, my coaching, and then just became a principal full time those last few years that I was at Central Catholic.
So you coached against Coach Griffith at Richmond.
Oh yeah.
Just as intimidating as Jack Butcher?
Probably a little more so, because Jack and we socialized a lot together, but Coach Griffith and I, we didn't. So we didn't really know each other very well. So, but he was awesome. I mean, he was very, I felt honored to be able to go up against him, but at the same time, I was still pretty young and he was later on in his career.
Talk about your stance towards class basketball.
Well, it's interesting because when that came up, the vote and all that, when we went to multiple class, I was one of the advocates at that time that I wanted to keep it in one class. But it really was because of my experience as a high school player, because I was blessed and fortunate enough to go through my high school year and beat the Broncos. And so I knew what it was like to be the little school winning a sectional championship and not winning a state championship, but that sectional was probably bigger than any state championship that I thought a single A would have, or double A, triple A, whatever. So I was not an advocate of going to multiple class. Now, so I was one of the votes back then because I was a principal, so I was able to vote on that. Well, I'm glad it went the way it did. I was wrong when I look back on it. I think it was the right thing to do, but I was stuck in that traditionalist mode. I didn't see the vision of what a multiple class would provide, but now I've seen it. I've been able to see it, as a principal. I've been able to see it. I've been on the board of directors with the IHSA the last 9-10 years, somewhere in that range. And so I've been able to go to these state championships. I've been able to see these multiple winners, and it's not everybody gets a trophy. I mean, there's still not that many teams that get to be state championship. The girls and the guys, there's 4 state champions, out of whatever, 300 some schools. So it's still an honor. And it's right, because I do think that the bigger schools, they've got an advantage in the little schools, although, like I say, once every 29 years, I happen to be in that once in 29 years, but otherwise there's going to be 28 years where people, get knocked out first game or something. So I now stand, I think it was a great call back when that happened in 1998, whenever that was. And I've seen so many things that have built programs, built communities, lot of pride. It's not just basketball. I mean, it's every sport. It's volleyball, it's tennis. I mean, not tennis because that's a team. That could be an individual sport. But all the team sports that have multiple classes, it's fun to watch those teams when they get to the final 16, the final 8, down to the final 2, and then crown a state champion, whether it's the boys or girls. I think it's the greatest thing that probably happened. I'm not on that fence anymore saying we should have stuck to the old way.
It's always interesting. You talk about the Indiana University basketball job or class basketball, and you just get a of commentary. So it's always, and I like that take. I like how you explained that class basketball and how it used to be. And it has worked out nicely for Lafayette Central Catholic. They have done a really good job. They've won a state in, I think, football, volleyball, and a couple state championships in basketball.
Exactly. Right. And sometimes it's not always winning the state. It's maybe winning a regional for somebody, You always hear every year that a school would, the first time they've ever won a sectional still, you get the smaller schools that'll come through, whether, again, name the sport, it's any sport. So it's advancing. There's just more opportunities when you have a good team. Here's a good example. Now, this is multiple, state championships, but just yesterday, we played Lawrence North. Cathedral played Lawrence North in basketball. And so we played the first game, both of us in the sectional tournament. We're all in 4A, so that's all fair. We're all, but, just so happened, they were ranked 2 or 3 in the state. We were ranked 4th in the state, and they beat us, and that's the way that it goes. But it's not that way every year. There's going to be balanced years where you're going to be able to, you get your opportunity to beat a team. And there's still upsets, even in the multiple classes. There's going to be upsets sometimes within that still gives these teams an opportunity to say, even if we were 5-15 regular season, a team can, because they're playing schools their size, they might get in a good bracket to move in and upset somebody, which makes it fun and exciting.
Did you go down and make sure that Jack Kiefer wasn't like a robot? Is he really human?
Well, I was at the top of the bleachers, and he was too far away from me, so I don't know. He was moving around. He was talking and coaching, so he was. I think he. Maybe some of it's on automatic pilot. He's been coaching a long time, so a lot of it he probably just looks at his players and they know what he wants them to do.
We played him a couple of times in the Hinkle sectional back in the 80s, and what a great, just because you brought it up, what a great job, and what a 45-year plus coaching career. What a great job he's done.
Well, look at all the great coaches that have won and been successful. There's not too many that are at one place practically. He's been at other places, but he's been the only coach at Lawrence North. And that in itself tells you that, he's been able to, build something that's pretty special and be content where he's at and work hard where he's at. And he's got a record to show for it. And there's not a lot of women or men that, really stay at one place. Just like I was saying, I always wanted to move my way up and get to the best school that might have a shot at going further. Some people, they're pretty content to say, okay, I'm here. Jack Butcher, good example, Lagodi. I mean, he didn't want to go anywhere else. And there's people all over the place wanting him to go coach at their schools. And he didn't even consider it. So yeah, there's a lot of real strong, committed people that believe in their school, their mission, their vision. There's a love to these high schools, especially.
Well, I'm going a little bit long. You got time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what gets you to Indianapolis? What do you like? Hey, it's, I'm going to be principal at Cathedral High School. How do you get there? And how hard was it at Central Catholic to give up the game of basketball? I know you still love it. You still watch it. You still, go to these folk stories that you guys tell in Southern Indiana every year in June. But how hard was it to walk away from coaching the game?
it was hard in kind of an odd way. It was not hard to walk away from being the coach, because I got to be honest, Billy, um, the latter part of my career as a head basketball coach at Central Catholic, part of it was the demands of being the principal of the school. That's a more important job than being a head basketball coach. I had a great administrative assistant. Her name was Kathy Deanhart. Because of Kathy, I was able to coach because she was such a great assistant, and she did a lot of the work behind the scenes that I couldn't get done, but she was so efficient. I was able to have my fun being a coach. But, as the years moved on, it became apparent to me that I couldn't do both, because, and I tell people this all the time that ask me, I noticed my last year that I coached, and Jason Delaney, who was our head coach here at Cathedral, he was a senior my last year as the head basketball coach at Central Catholic. Love Jason. He's awesome. Amazing guy. But
Came over from Tech, right?
yeah, he was at Tech prior to coming to Cathedral. But that year, Jason's senior year, again, I'm kind of telling myself, I would go to practice some days, and I never did this in my whole career, all the years I'd been coaching. I'd look at the clock. I remember looking at the clock in the gym saying, oh my gosh, practice isn't over yet? Well, I knew right there, and I went home and told Janet, I said, this is my last year, because I'm cheating the kids, because I'm not giving my whole self and energy to coaching those boys. I was like, let's get this practice over. And that was so unfair to them. So it wasn't like horribly bad, but I still got after it. But then it was easy, because I turned over to Chad Dunwoody, be a full-time principal for 4 or 5 years. So that was the other part of it. So that was easy to resign from that, because I was just tired. I was done. The hard part was when Chad was the coach the next year, I didn't know where to sit in the gym. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was lost. I was like a little puppy in the gym, because the game, warm up, I was the principal of school, but as the principal, I was always on the bench coaching the game. So I honest to goodness, I was like, I don't know what to do. I didn't know how to not be a coach. And it took me probably darn near 10 games before I finally could get settled down and just be a fan, because I wasn't going to be the coach looking over shoulders or telling Chad what to do. I would never do that. And I did, but I didn't know what to do with my time. So when I finally figured out to be a principal and, kind of check on our fans and make sure that safety, kind of do my spot checks. I mean, I had a great AD that was doing those things, but that was the hard part. So it took me about a half a year. And then from there, and then I was a principal ever since, until just last year, as I said. And it's funny, you say, how did I get to Cathedral? I wasn't looking to go anywhere. I just wanted, I was probably thinking I'll be the principal of Central Catholic till, they carry me out of here, in however many years after I was there. But I met Father Pat Kelly, who was on an accreditation team at Lafayette Central Catholic early in my tenure as a principal at Lafayette Central Catholic. Well, he was the principal of Cathedral at the time. So we got to be good buddies. So this was like in 92, I think it was. I met Father Pat. So we became buds. So because of that accreditation, and he was kind of my mentor. So when he decided to retire in 2002, which is like 10 years after I met him, he said, Dave, why don't you apply for my principal's job at Cathedral? And it was, again, big honor. It was like, wow, never thought about that, biggest Catholic high school in the state. But it's like, I went home and I just told my 3 kids, which I haven't said anything about my kids. I got the 3 awesomest kids in the whole wide world. Lance is our oldest. He was the one that was 1 year old when we were at South Dearborn. Courtney is 1 year younger than him. And then Sean's 3 years younger than Courtney. So those are my pride and joy. And Janet's done a great job raising them during those years that I was like workaholic, coaching, principalship. She was kept them at home and at bay. But it was so interesting, because I went home and said, hey, told Lance, Courtney, and Sean and Janet, hey, probably ought to apply for the Cathedral job. They were like, they took a vote and said 0-4, no way in heck, Dad, are we leaving Lafayette Central Catholic? Because Lance was a freshman there. Courtney was an eighth grader. We were junior high, so she was an eighth grader. And Sean was like in fifth grade at St. Boniface. And then Janet was like, she sided with the kids, like, we're not moving anywhere. We're staying right here. So I said, well, I'm just going to think about it. Well, as it turned out, I told Father Kelly, I'm not going to apply for the job. And he said, well, why not? I said, well, you know, family's not real keen on it and all that kind of stuff. He said, well, you know what? He says, you probably wouldn't get it anyway. And so, and he knew me pretty well, and he knew I was a competitor. So I said, you know what, Father, I'm going to apply for the job. And guess what? I'm going to try to get it, and then I'm going to turn it down because you just said I wasn't going to get it. So I did. I applied for it. Long story short, I fell in love with the place after I interviewed, and I was like begging to get the job practically from the committee. So they offered me the job. And so that was Father Kelly, you know, God rest his soul right now because he's no longer with us. But if it wasn't for him telling me, you know, you're probably not going to get it anyway, I probably would never have applied. And of course, been here 20 years, and Cathedral is just been such a wonderful experience for me, for my three children, for my wife, for our family. All three of our kids got to graduate from Cathedral. Central Catholic was a great school too, but you know, they had the balance of the two. So I could not have had a better career. And the greatest thing, when I stepped down as principal, I've got this new role here that I'm in the advancement office, and I'm able to talk to our alums, our donors, our graduates, and people that were here at Cathedral 20 years ago, that when I was a principal, I'm meeting with them, talking to them about how they might want to get back to the dear old Cathedral.
It was interesting, like I said earlier at the beginning of the show, of how, you know, you learn something new about Indiana high school basketball and the game of basketball. Just when you think you know everything, you learn something else new. I dropped your name to several people and just wanted their thoughts on you during my research, and I got books back. Literally, I got just long things of how good of a guy you were, of how good of a family man you were, and you know, just, you know, even people who don't know you really well, like Kenneth Barlow wrote a small chapter in describing you. Coach Sean Martin, Lanny Segal. I don't even know if you know Lanny Segal, but he even told me all fabulous, wonderful things about you. So, I mean, what a fabulous career. I know that we have ran long. I appreciate your time. I don't know if we want to leave with anything with, you know, the state of the game. What do you think the state of the game of basketball is in Indiana today?
Well, I'll give you a quick comment on that, but my second to last closing comments would be, it is so great being a grandfather. You know, I've got Lillian, Ella, and Will are my grandchildren, and that's even though I've got a great full-time job here. But when you're not the principal and you don't have anybody to supervise, and you got a great person to work for in Denise Farrell, I'm able to spend time with my grandkids. And that is the highlight of my career life and everything, is being able to spend time with those three. And I might be blessed with a few other grandkids before it's all over. Sean and Katie just got married last October, and they talk like they might want to have a few too. So that's the greatest thing. I want everybody to know that it doesn't get any better now. I always thought what it'd be like to be a grandpa, but until I was a grandpa, I realized that. State of basketball, I think it's going to continue to grow. I think it's you know, let's face it. Look what's going on in Indianapolis right now with the college tournament. Everything's here. It's right here. All the tournaments going to be here in Indiana. We just started the boys basketball sectional. Highlight galore. The girls basketball state tournament just finished here a while back. Once we can get through the pandemic, you know, it's just going to continue to grow. And we've got some of the best coaches around in boys and girls basketball, every level, kindergarten up to varsity. We got awesome colleges here in Indiana. So it's going to go nowhere but up. I think our parents in across the state, thanks to the IHSAA with sportsmanship, Sandra Walters and Paul Neidig and Chris Kaufman and all the assistant commissioners are great leaders in that area. So I think we're the best state in the union when it comes to being able to have this awesome sport. And it's only going to get better because we even though we paused a little bit this last year with the pandemic, we're going to have state champion this year in boys basketball. And we didn't last year because of it was a brand new, pandemic. We didn't know what was going on back then. We just got blindsided. But now that we're getting over that, I just look in the back of your pictures back there of just all the history, and that is awesome history, Billy. And I can kind of go up and down memory lane looking at the back. But in 50 years from now, there's going to be 10 times the greatness that we're going to be able to have here in Indiana to tell about this awesome game of basketball.
What did the grandchildren call you? Grandpa?
Papa.
Papa.
Papa. They got that on their own. I didn't tell them what to call me. They just came up with it. So I'm Papa. So they.
I have Ella and a Heidi, and they call me G-Paw.
Oh, how'd the G get in there?
I don't know, but I was kind of excited for it. So,
it's nice to have something a little unique, right?
Yes, and I do have gray hair. I just have a hat to hide it. So
okay, I do have all white, but I do got some hair. I do have a little bit on there. The sun's shining on it, so it probably looks like I'm bald, but it is. I do got a little bit on there.
Coach Dave Worland, what an exceptional interview. I'm sure everybody is going to enjoy this. I thank you for your time, and the stories can't be remembered if they're not told. And I thank you for helping to keep the nostalgia alive.
Oh, I'm very honored and look forward to continuing doing what I can do for not only basketball, but all the kiddos that I run across here at Cathedral and throughout Indiana.